Hello, everybody, and welcome back to What Does Jesus Teach? It's definitely been a while, and glad to be back. Today I'm beginning a new series. I am calling it End Times and Revelation. This will be going over some things about the rapture, the book of Revelation, some things in the Old Testament, and really just kind of getting a good solid look at what the Bible has to say regarding the raptures and some end times theology. And for me, there's two main purposes. One is, do a verse by verse walkthrough when we get to the book of Revelation itself, and walk through what the scriptures say about when the rapture takes place, so we're all more prepared and understand what to expect. Now, of course, why spend some time on it? Well, Revelation 1:3 really gives us a good focus on it. You know what? It says, "Blessed is he who reads and those who hear the words of the prophecy and heed the things which are written in it, for the time is near." And Hosea 4:6a, the first part of it, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge." So, again, just to be really upfront, a lot of what we're going to cover as we walk through this might be difficult to hear, depending on what you believe or where you're coming from. It's mostly because, for the most part, a lot of pastors don't really do an extensive walkthrough of the end times. They may just kind of blurb out a couple things here and there, and just you kind of assume that what they say is true and don't look into it. But Jesus plainly says that those who review the material in the book of Revelation and heed it are the ones who are blessed. So maybe it's important that we go through it. So yeah, first off, I definitely want you to be blessed. We're going to read, and hopefully that you take heed to it. And I want your faith to grow, so your trust in Jesus increases. And after we walk through this, we're going to understand a lot more, and how much more we're going to need Jesus than maybe what we think we might currently. And third, I don't want anybody to be deceived by the teachings from the past or lack of information. Again, like the scripture says in Hosea 4:6, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge," and I don't want anybody to be destroyed due to a lack of knowledge. All right. So the first part I'm going to walk through today is the four futurist views on the timing of the rapture, just to understand what some of the four primary views are. There are a few other views that exist. There are some variation of these four, and there are some views that point to the rapture or the coming crisis already having happened some time ago. We're sticking to the futurist ones right now. This series is not dedicated to focusing on the views of preterists, which is mostly what's called, which means it's already taken place. That'll just make this a lot longer to do. Right now I'm just focusing on the futurist ones. If anybody wants the preterist view kind of comparison down the road, we'll take a look at that later, but right now we're going to examine the four futurist ones. Okay, so the first one we're going to talk about is a pre-tribulation view. Pre-tribulation is what you'll most likely hear in the western part of the world preached the most often. Typically you'll find this from the Baptist denomination, maybe Methodist, Assemblies of God, and a few others. It's the most popular when you look at movies and books that you see published, like the real popular ones. So here's kind of how some characteristics of it, just through my personal research. It has a moderate level of popularity, again from a global perspective. It teaches that the church will be raptured or taken from this world right before the beginning of Daniel's 70th week. Again, if you don't know what Daniel's 70th week is, that's okay. Just think of it as the last 7 years, and if you don't know what that is either, we're going to go into it. The church will miss all tribulation from the Antichrist and all of God's wrath that follows. It considers all negative events as part of the full 7 years, and believes that currently there are no signs required at all before the rapture can come. So if you see the red arrow over here, is pointing that the church is going to be taken before any of the 7-year period even begins. Okay? So that's the pre-tribulation view. Now we have one called mid-tribulation. Out of the four main ones, it's the least common view that I've been able to come across from others. It teaches the church will be raptured at or about the middle of the 7-year period. The church will experience tribulation in the first half of the 7 years, but will experience no suffering in the second half because the church will be raptured at the midpoint. Generally speaking, it considers the first half as tribulation suffering for saints, but the second half is God's wrath on the wicked. Okay, so we can see the red arrow on this one. You see it's pointing right in the middle. This is when a mid-tribulation believer believes the rapture will occur. Right? Some suffering over here, persecution, and God's wrath after they're taken away. Okay. The third view is called prewrath. It's got a moderate popularity, probably a little less popular or accepted than the pre-tribulation one. It teaches that the church will be raptured at an unknown day or hour after the end of the first half. The church will experience tribulation in the first half of the 7 years and great tribulation in some of the second half, but will not experience God's wrath at all. Basically, the tribulation from the Antichrist is until the rapture, and after that period is done, God's wrath against the wicked begins. So you can see where the arrow is pointing over here. It shows that the church would go through the first half, then some unknown portion here in the purple, which we call the Great Tribulation, and then once the church is gone, the remaining portion, it's God's wrath. Okay. And the last one that we'll mention here is called post-tribulation. Again, it's got a moderate, probably just about the same as pre-wrath in terms of popularity or acceptance. It teaches the church will be raptured at the end of the 7-year period. The church will have tribulation from the Antichrist, most if not all the 7 years. But the church will be supernaturally protected from God's wrath that occurs during that 7-year period. Tribulation and wrath are treated the same in regard to the timing, but in this view, if the persecution comes from the Antichrist, you may have to, suffer through that persecution. The wrath from God falling during that 7-year period, God will supernaturally protect you somehow. Again, I'm not getting into the specifics as to how they believe that'll happen. And these are very general. Okay. Now, just make sure I don't miss anything. Okay, cool. So let me get into a quick summary. All right. Now, in terms of spiritual preparedness, if we look at pre-tribulation, those who believe in a pre-tribulation rapture, the primary goal of a person that's already come to faith is to be rapture ready. Now, depending on the person's doctrine for salvation, it could mean either, and there may be variants of this, but in general, this means either that once you receive Jesus and you get saved, guess what? You're already fully rapture ready. Or if you believe that you have to be obedient until the end to be saved, then you must be a faithful follower of Jesus to remain rapture ready up to the point of the rapture. Now, there is no teaching regarding, within the pre-tribulation rapture, they don't teach regarding being persecution ready for the rapture. But some do believe that enduring persecution can take place before the end time period to be saved. But ultimately, there is no teaching that one must be spiritually prepared to endure persecution during the 7-year period. Okay. The mid-trib, pre-wrath, and post-trib, what they all have in common is that the goal is to be persecution ready at all times, and more so regarding the end times period. So for these three, being rapture ready is being persecution ready up to and including losing your life for the sake of Christ now or in the end times period, somewhere within that 7-year block. Obviously, all three have a different arrow, like we just saw in terms of, up to what point. But all three believe that persecution readiness is part of being in rapture readiness. Okay, so which view is the right one? Okay, well, if you've seen some of my videos, you'll know probably where I stand. But for the purposes of this study, rather than me telling you just up front what I believe and adding the bias up front, we're going to find the timing of the rapture together. Now, to be clear, we're not going to be looking for the day and the hour, because I can't tell you what that is. Jesus says nobody knows the day or the hour. But we can determine the season based on the scriptures. Now, once we get to the book of Revelation, I'm going to frequently kind of stop and kind of ask, as if we were all in the same room together, if you see anything there regarding the rapture having already happened. And to find the rapture, we should see some direct mention of the Lord's people being taken, or a huge group in heaven, or something direct like that. And once you see the scriptures, it'll be very obvious. And if you're in front of me, you'll be telling me when the rapture takes place. I've done this class in person, online a couple times, and almost without fail, 90% of the time, the students or the class and kind of the discussion group will say, "Oh, there it is," and I didn't have to tell them because we're letting the scripture do the talking for us. So, with that being said, I will end it right here and look forward to the next class coming shortly, which will talk about Daniel's 70th week. God bless you. Have a great day.